All right, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to Chopping It Up with PScott. I'm Prescott Kelly. Today is Tuesday, September 10th. Glad to have you back with us. Week 1 is completely in the books of the NFL season. Some teams are off to a great start, even though it's only one win. Some have had a surprising start. Some have had a somewhat disappointing start to their season. But I'm here to defend you or roast you, depending on where you lay on that end of the spectrum. You can find Chop and PScott wherever you get your audio platform podcasts as well. I've been doing a bad job with the live streams, not uploading them to Spotify, Apple Music, and all that good stuff. After this episode, I plan on doing that. So if you missed some of the lives, you can still get into it there. Big shout out once again still to Mac Brooks of the Mac Truck Podcast, Nick Stevenson of the Houston Sports Stadium Podcast, and the new Two Toros Podcast, which you can find on YouTube as well. So we'll do a recap real quick of PScott's picks from week 1. We're not going to get anything too intricate today. It's still too far out. I'm also not going to wager on Thursday night. Buffalo at Miami. It's not going to be part of my PScott's picks anyway, so we're going to kind of gloss over that. You'll get my complete games for Sunday and Monday, either probably Thursday after work or Friday after work. So you'll still have those things in pocket in case you want to try to follow my suit and see if what I'm doing is working. Because right now, we're 3-1-1. If you missed them, I had the Seahawks -2 against the Packers. That hit. Seahawks -6 against the Broncos. That was a push, so that's by one tie. Rams +4 against the Lions. If Puka doesn't get hurt, maybe that doesn't happen, but they lost by 6. That's the one that we missed. Niners -4.5 against the Jets. We hit on that one. And Chargers -3 against the Raiders. We hit on that one too. So 1-3, 1 loss, 1 tie. So we're off to a pretty good start. I asked you guys on the Chop Up PScott page, it is only week 1, and we obviously are going to overreact. And we had a little bit of this on Sunday, right before the Thursday or the Sunday night game started. We had a little live with me and Sierra McGee and JD's, and we were looking at who's overhyped and who's overrated and everything in between. But with it being week 1 and now we're completely done with it, I asked the audience, what do you think of what was something that you thought was going to be true after week 1 and it confirmed your bias, and what was something you completely whiffed on? And I don't want to get through all these because we had some pretty good feedback and a lot of it in a pretty short amount of time, but I do want to run through some of these. So Josh Whiteman, who is a friend of mine and who's a big Niners fan, says, confirm that the 49ers are going to run on everyone this year. I mean, I feel like that's pretty standard. But Randy Gorman, obviously another friend of mine, he lives in Texas and is a Seahawks fan, says until they face the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, I guess. And Josh replied, nah, they'll start to run on them. Kyle will just stop doing in the fourth quarter for who knows why. And it's hard to argue that logic. Monty Denman said, confirm people will say Dallas fans always, with an ellipsis. Cowboys fans are always going to catch that heat. It's always going to happen. This is a pretty common theme. I got this from Chris Smith, Matt Zabrowski, Hunter Maher, Jamie Trainer. Didn't really hit on this as much, but I know 3 or 4 people continuously hit on Carolina. And when this season started, I was being told that New England was going to be the worst team in the NFL. And I said, I think it's going to be a 3-team race. I think it's going to be between New England and Carolina and the Giants. If you're asking me who to pick, I couldn't tell you who I thought would have the worst record of the 3 of them. But to me, like, that's the consensus 3, right? I've been telling you all of this now for 3 years on this show, is that we know that there's 3 that are great. There's 3 that are cheeks. And then everybody else is kind of 500 because that's what we see. There's a lot of 8-9, 9-8s. You have a lot of the 6-win teams, but there's games they should have won that they lost. You see some 11-win teams that won that should have lost. Like, there's always going to be the 500 teams, and a couple bounces go your way, and your win total just shifts 2 or 3 games the opposite direction, right? But you're essentially a 500 team. So that was, for me, I was pretty confident that it was going to be Carolina, New England, and the Giants as the 3 bottom feeders of this year's NFL season. Now, New England shocked most of the world. And to be fair, I didn't think they were going to win. We got into this a little bit earlier on Sunday's episode because when I do PScott's picks, I'll still touch on, 3 to 5 different games that keep an eye out for. It isn't something that I did. So I'm not telling you how to bet your money with my bet my money on your money, that kind of thing. But they are an additional few games I'm just throwing out there as feelers. And it was one of those things because the point spread was so high and there was no T. Higgins. I could see that defense being able to bracket up Jamar Chase. There's no Joe Mixon. Joe Burrow tends to not play well early, it feels like. So this is a game where I'm surprised that New England won, but it was a game where I was on the fence about the point spreads. What I'm worried about is people now overvaluing the Patriots when it is a week one win, but you still won ugly. It's still to me not a great football team defensively. I know they're going to be good, and that was never going to be in question for me personally. But to get back to Carolina, that's the one thing for me. If I'm talking about things that I whiffed on as far as week one is concerned, it's Carolina because I don't have any faith in New Orleans, and they came out and just absolutely beat the out of Carolina. It's like they didn't even want to show up. Now I didn't watch this game, and I usually don't want to. If I didn't watch it, I don't want to speak on it. But you see certain score lines and stat lines and go, this didn't have any chance. I don't know why. For me, the way I was trying to approach this with a little bit of positivity was it's a brand new season. We know that you're still not good, referring to Carolina. We know that you're still not good, but it can't get much worse, right? But getting clapped by New Orleans by infinity billion points is not a good start to your season. I think that it'll be a little bit better as the season goes on. Again, the division doesn't seem to be much of anything either. And Zed Mitchell was another one of the people I've had on the show repeatedly, and he's he's an Alabama fan, but he also talks about the Falcons. He's a Falcons fan. He said the ATL is still ATL. I try to tell y'all. And the one thing I will say about the Atlanta Falcons and them looking so bad they did week one is, if I remember right, I believe is the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh used to be their head coach. Somebody on the inside at Pittsburgh used to coach for the Falcons. I forget what position or what coach he is, but there's somebody who was on the inside with Atlanta last year and when they played Pittsburgh, this doesn't seem as egregious as it could, because again, looking forward to some of these games, and I want to get to, we're not going to do PScott's picks for week 2, but there's a lot of 6 and 7 plus point spreads on week 2, which you don't usually see in the NFL. It's usually somewhere between 1.5 and 4, right? Because home field advantage is supposed to be worth 3. So the fact that there's I went through this afternoon, there is half the games are 6-point spread or higher, which is ridiculous. And that's one of the games is Atlanta at Philadelphia. So just going through a little bit of these real quick. Buffalo is plus 2.5 at Miami. I don't like that. Stay away. Just stay away from it. Because when the Bills went to Miami last year, it was 140,000 degree weather, and Miami just completely just toasted, no pun intended, for Buffalo, and they just couldn't keep up. I'd watch out for that. Buffalo has to completely change. If they really want to beat Miami, to me, they have to play this like they did the latter half of last year and not the way they did week 1, which we'll get to later as well. Cleveland is plus 3 at Jacksonville. I don't like that game for either one of them. Deshaun Watson they play the Cowboys on national television. I think whenever you play on national television, whatever headlines are kind of under the radar get brought to the surface quicker and with more vitriol when it's on national television, right? Because that was the game of the year or the game of the week on Fox. Deshaun Watson and his previous transgressions have largely kind of flown on the radar because now it's just the narrative has changed from we thought you was a nasty person to now you're just not good at football anymore, bro. Like we've changed the narrative of we don't really care about what you've done previously. Like it's still going to get brought up because it's Deshaun Watson, and when he plays, for lack of a better term, when you get your That's what's going to happen. But we've shifted from him acting a certain way to now it's just, dude, you're not good at this at the position anymore. And when you get crushed like they did against Dallas, everything else just perpetually gets thrown back on top of you. So to me, and I had LaShawn Brown on, who is a Browns fan, and he was talking about how bad this Browns O line is. And I thought that used to be a strong point of them, not even just like 2 years ago, right? But apparently it's bad. And actually being able to watch it in real time, it's not good. So Deshaun wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but the offensive line couldn't protect for anything at all either. So I do think I'm not going to jump the gun too much because I think that Cleveland has too much talent overall, especially because that defense is too good, but I'm not touching that. We'll get more. I'm not going to go through every single game, but the games that have the 6+ point differential, the spread on them, is Vegas at the Ravens, and the Ravens are -10. Chargers are at the Panthers. The Chargers are -6.5. Saints at Cowboys. Cowboys -6.5. The Niners at Minnesota. Niners -6.5 or -6, excuse me. The Bucks are at Detroit. Detroit -7. The I'm sorry, the Rams. We go back. Boom, boom, boom. The Bears at the Texans. Texans -6.5, and the Falcons at the Eagles. Eagles -6.5. That's 8 games, bro. That's crazy. Half of week 2 right now, as it stands, is six points or higher. But to get back to Zeb's point about Atlanta's gonna Atlanta, with the coaching staff being so familiar with Atlanta, not being able to put up as many points as you would like, to me at least, there's an explanation for it. I've been high on Philly. I think that Philly has the chance to threaten with the teams like San Francisco. We'll get to Detroit a little bit later on. But Philadelphia to me is talent-wise, especially offensively, can hang it up with anybody. Now we saw them have some offensive line issues again. That's week 1, but when you got AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and now Saquon really being featured, offensively, I feel they're going to be okay. But the defense in the secondary, most specifically, is to settle big plays and through the passing game. And with Atlanta not having somebody in their back pocket, knowing they plays like it's you got served, I don't know if I pick Atlanta to win, but Atlanta plus 6.5, that's probably going to hit the PScott's picks for the docket for week 2. But moving on. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on the Caleb Williams thing, mostly because I went over this with CR, who's a big Bears fan. The reason why I say that Caleb Williams has got to be relieved for a bit is we've seen him at Oklahoma and at USC where he's got to be perfect for them to even have a chance, right? He has to ball out every single week for those teams to even have a chance. Now, it does help they played against Will Levis, who I've been telling y'all for a minute is cheeks, and y'all need to give up on that man. But the people who love Mayo and people who are miracle whippers, I will say this. So I mentioned this earlier. I appreciate the fact that he leaned into the Hellman's commercial. That was funny. I do appreciate him doing that, but I don't feel like he's good. There's enough talent in Tennessee where they should be good, at least offensively. They should at least be competent. And Chicago has some good pieces on defense, right? I think that we can all agree that it's not an elite defense, but there's enough players there. And now going into year 2 with most of them being there, it should be a pretty formidable squad. But it's got to be good for Caleb Williams to feel like I don't have to carry a team. And now he's still getting backlash because he didn't play well, right? I think that we're all going to understand that. Number 1 overall pick, the nail painting thing, that's either going to be a hit or miss for fans or people in the media. That's just going to be a talking point just because it's who he is and it's a little bit outside the box. It's unconventional for quarterbacks, most specifically, especially number 1 overall picks, and you're wanting them to be the CEO of your franchise, which has always been a weird way of putting that kind of label on how important they are to you, but pretend that a football player is the CEO of your corporation when they really aren't. But my larger point was it's got to be relieving for Caleb to be able to come into a situation, not play well, and still get a win. Like that has to feel at least like there's some form of Okay, man. We got the pieces here. Now it's up to me to elevate and for me to really come into my own. And it is. It's week one. Rookie quarterbacks usually don't bode well on week one. But I feel like there's got to be a little bit of, man, this was crazy and this was intense. I didn't play well, but we still got the W. And he's not used to that. So I'm not sure who they play coming up this week. I would expect to see a little bit better game. I got the games up in front of me. Let's just go ahead and see. Should be towards the top. Boop, boop, boop. Or not. There we go. Okay, yeah. So they're at Houston. So the Bears play at Houston, and the Bears are a 6.5 point underdog. So statistically, maybe you see a better game from Caleb because I think that Houston's going to be able to get up and run with all those weapons. They're going to be able to put up some points. So maybe you see them in a shootout. Houston's got a good defense though, but maybe him being on the road, being in a dome, I don't know, man. But I would expect a statistical better game from Caleb Williams game 2 than you did game 1. But for me, it was just, man, it's got to feel good to not play your best ball and still get a W because that man ain't used to it at USC in Oklahoma. Moving on. I defended Stefon Diggs a lot over the past 3 to 4 months or so, mostly because I have been a very big defendant of there is no Josh Allen without Stefon Diggs, and I really firmly stand by that. People forget how bad Josh Allen was before they got that guy. I always do this. I always credit the front office because what they did when they first got Josh Allen was let's get big guys, big catch radiuses, because we know he's not accurate and we know he makes dumb decisions. So we'll get guys like Kelvin Benjamin, which was a bad idea. But they had bigger wide receivers and said that's not working. And they went and got smaller wide receivers like Cole Beasley and John Brown. Let's get guys who can get separation, had a little bit more success. And they went and got Stefon Diggs and they put those guys who were playing number one. Like John Brown was a good wide receiver. This is no shade on him, but he can't be your number one dude. Cole Beasley can't be your number 2 dude. Once they got Stefon Diggs, all their players got to rotate into the position that they were supposed to play. And you had a dominant target that you knew I can go to that guy 12 times a game easily and get anywhere between 7 and 10 receptions for this dude. That is my bailout. That dude is the reason why Josh Allen got to where he is, because without him, the confidence probably doesn't grow. They sure as hell aren't getting anybody else to come there, right? And I always catch a lot of heat on this because people want to pick and choose the parts about Josh Allen that I talk about and try to weaponize my insight against me, even though I really haven't been wrong. I've been telling y'all for a while. I know that he's great, but he puts them in a lot of bad positions. Yes, he helps get them out of it. But if you just don't make the mistake initially, he's the one getting all the love, which is weird. Because I know that he's great. Okay. Let's just stop with people telling me that I'm saying that he's not good at football because I know that he is. Now, if the Stefon Diggs trade never happens, I don't think that he gets to the point that he is now. So I've been hearing a lot of Josh Allen isn't going to miss Stefon Diggs. He is. That game with the Cardinals should not have been the game that it was. I've been telling y'all now because, again, I watch Buffalo. A lot of the people who want to argue with me don't actually watch the Bills. They see the stats, they see the box score, and they see the highlights. And I told y'all before this year, James Conner's going to run on them, and he did. This game should have never even been close. I'm going to go on a Bills tangent for now, and then I'll go back and defend Stefon Diggs in a moment. But this run defense isn't good. Their secondary, I was worried about Marvin Harrison Jr. just completely toasting this secondary. But what they decided to do was cover that man up and let everybody else eat, which I guess is fine. But James Conner was running all over that defensive line in the first quarter. I think he had 10 carries in the first quarter. It was 8 or just something obnoxious. They were running him into the ground. Then they brought in their secondary running back. I didn't have necessarily a problem with that, but they let Buffalo get back in. On top of the fact that I was hearing a bunch of the terrible unsportsmanlike conduct against Buffalo with Kyler Murray on the first drive. And you're right. It was an egregious call. It was really bad. It shouldn't have happened. It's not me being a Bills homer. That's just the fact that it was a really, really bad call. Or, me trying to be me trying to be so far against Buffalo because I like to throw everything into the mix of I'm a fan, but I'm also a realist. It was, though. That was a very terrible call. You still had the opportunity to stop him, and you didn't. But Josh Allen had no problem. This has always been my argument. I hate this because this dude is a minotaur. He's 6'5", jacked, crazy athlete. And when things don't go his way, there was a face mask, there was a rough in the pass, whatever the call was, and there was nothing that was done. He got grabbed down by his jersey, and he gave up on the play. He gave up, and he's rolling down, he's throwing and crying, and they called a penalty, which it wasn't a penalty. Then the second half rolls around, and he has a similar play, but acts like an adult, and the throw goes for like 40 yards. That is my problem. My problem with Josh Allen is I know he's great, but he is seeking calls, and he's a crybaby. And when people have told me, or when the NFL can't be wrong about both of these things, right? You can't say he's one of the best players in the league because he is. And also, if the players are saying that he's overrated, this is why he's great and he's overrated. Number one in overall touchdowns since he came into the league, right? Or since like 2021 or whatever number they put. But who also leads the league in turnovers? The same dude. Like, they're put in bad situations because of him, and then a lot of times teams allow him, they just allow them to get back into the game because it's the safer route. It's just let them get back in. We'll give himself over the middle. We'll let Josh Allen get his rushing touchdowns or whatever. You can be great and still be overrated. Those two things can coexist. Now, to get back over to Stefon Diggs, I'm really, really, really tired of people telling me that he's a locker room cancer. When everywhere that he's gone, the dude has played well and he's balled out. What they're doing is what everybody loves to do. Recency bias and what just recently happened. The Bills took him out as being the focal point of their offense about middle of the season last year. And that's when they went on their run. But why they go on their run? Nobody was expecting them to not use Stefon Diggs, right? So then you start getting the other guys acclimated, you start using your running game more. But the Bills do the exact same thing week one this year that they do previously. And it's abandon the run. They had James Cook. They didn't really use him all that much. They want to put everything on Josh Allen as he's the savior of the franchise. And as long as you do that, whenever he does anything wrong, it's going to be Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things. But when he does something great, it's going to be, look at that Josh Allen dude. He is the epitome of, you live by the three, you die by the three, right? He's the reason why you can maybe get blown out. He's also the reason why you can blow somebody out. But Stefon, when he wasn't incorporated last year, other guys started to eat, and it started to become the narrative of, see, you don't need the diva wide receiver. He didn't want to be in Minnesota anymore because he was tired of losing, which is weird that he went to Buffalo. I mean, that wasn't a trade. He didn't really have a whole lot to do or say with that. But he goes to Buffalo, and they instantly become contenders. Isn't that wild to you? And he's incredibly productive the entire time. Then he sees it's the same story every year. And Josh is getting all this praise and none of the criticism, or he's getting too much. I'm just saying, like, from the perspective of Diggs, because there are plenty of people who saying that Allen's overrated. I'm one of them. Again, no, he's great, but I can also say he's overrated the exact same breath. He's looking at it as, well, dude, I'm just tired of this. I'm too good to be making it to divisional round playoffs every single year. I want more than this, which I don't think there's any problem with that. But we also saw a very similar timeline with this guy named Jimmy Butler. And I've been told, well, Jimmy shows up in the playoffs. Stefon has shown up in the playoffs multiple times. But when you have a one-game sample size and you're getting booted, he's had a couple of really, really good playoff games. But if you're only getting to play in 2 a year, if you have a stinker, that's half of it, right? You can't really come back from that. Like, statistically wise, or by the metrics of percentage of games you can play, Jimmy Butler has had absolute trash playoff games. A lot of them. But we know him as playoff Jimmy because if you have a bad game, you have the ability to bounce back from it. right? Unless it's game 7, you always have at least another one. Now, maybe if you're down 3-0 already or 4, whatever the case might be, but what I'm saying is like, as long as you have an ability to still win the series, there's always a next game. And you always have at least, at bare minimum, a 4-game sample size to be able to rectify whatever you did wrong and change a narrative. Even if you get bounced in 5 games, if your game 4 and 5 were awesome, the narrative goes, well, the team lost, but at least he was great. And Jimmy's been the beneficiary of a lot of that as well. Again, not saying that Jimmy hasn't been great, but I'm tired. We had labeled him a cancer, right? Everywhere that he went, it was a cancer. Why? Because he wanted to win more than anybody else. And then every place that he's gone, though, they have instantly gotten better. So he gets labeled as a cancer because he ruins the locker room. But then we see Minnesota go to the playoffs, and they haven't been to the playoffs in infinity billion years. And then he goes to Philly, and we see him in Miami. Every place that Jimmy Butler's gone, he instantly makes that team better. Stefon Diggs has had the exact same track record. Stop calling him a cancer. It ain't that man's fault. Maybe he just wants other people to do better because he knows that he's better. Moving on. Yeah, I had to get that off my chest because I'm tired of people just bagging on Stefan all the time, man. Y'all gotta leave that alone. So we went over Caleb Williams. We kind of went over some of the other things that people had talked about were the things that they missed on, things that they thought were going to get right. Again, I really thought that Carolina would at least show up week 1, at least be competitive. And that was not going to be part of the equation, apparently. So I want to talk Niners and Jets real quickly. And then again, we're not going to do PScott's picks, but what we will do is touch on a number of games that I think will be part of it going forward. So if you want to start setting your bets, get a little bit of a head jump on it. But my analysis before the game started, which we were doing this on Sunday on our live midway through the afternoon games, was I know San Francisco is going to be awesome, and I didn't know initially that Christian McCaffrey wasn't going to play until like Monday afternoon because I was at work. I thought McCaffrey was still going to play. Nope. I found the notification at about 3 or 4 hours before game time. And even still with that, I mean, obviously I can't change who I already bet on, but I didn't feel bad about it. There's certain things like when you get injuries last minute and you can't change it, you're like, all right, well, now I'm out my money. That wasn't one of them, though. Though the thing I was always worried about is you can say that Aaron Rodgers played last year, but 4 snaps to me is essentially you missed an entire season. So he hasn't played in over 2 seasons, right? Because that's when he had the injury, or even he wasn't even great in Green Bay his final year. But he hasn't played a game in basically 2 full years. So I have no reference of what version of Aaron Rodgers I'm going to get. I still know Ayuk's playing. I know that. Debo Samuel, like they have backup running backs. And it is like, man, it's just if your last name is Shanahan, you're going to be able to use running backs. But I don't even know why. I understand why they made the trade for McCaffrey because since he's been there, he's number 1 in all-purpose yards and touchdowns, and he's been awesome. But it's not like you really necessarily need him to make the machine work that is the San Francisco offense. But when I was looking at that matchup and I saw just how much money was being thrown on the Jets, because it initially started at like 7.5 and then it kind of dwindled down, and then the Ayuk stuff happened, and then it was Trent Williams, and like there's all this buzz, and it's because it's the Niners and it's been a really loud offseason, we don't trust them. They're not going to be focused. This group has been playing together for 3 to 4 years now. It's almost the exact same squad. I know McCaffrey's only been there for a couple of years. And there's obviously been a little bit of turnover, but it's largely like the core guys, they've been there. I'm pretty sure they're going to be okay for week 1. But the Jets, I have issues with their offensive line. They got some names in there, right? They went and got Tyron Smith, old as hell. The one thing I was concerned about was the Niners last year on the ground defensively weren't awesome. So I thought maybe, just maybe, you run the ball a lot, try to go run top heavy, and then hit him with play action. But they kind of went away from it. They went a lot of short passes to Wilson and even Breece Hall out of the backfield. I just feel like that offensive line, I don't trust the defense as much as most people do. They're really high on that team, and they were good last year. I'm not trying to knock what the New York Jets are or what they're supposed to be. But it's the Niners. There wasn't one part of me the only way that I could see them not winning by 4.5 was Trent would not have to play, and at least one of their wide receivers, Debo or Ayuk, one of the two wouldn't have to play. And Ayuk didn't even have a great game. But this goes back to the theory that I was saying with Stefon is like, even though he wasn't contributing towards the end of last year, he's the threat. If he's not part of the threat, if he's not part of the equation, you don't fear anybody. So when Ayuk's out there, even though he didn't play great, it still opens up things. It opens up run lanes. And that's why their dude Mason was awesome. Not just because of Ayuk, but it's because it's the offensive line, the way that the Shanahan's, it's just genetics at this point. They just know how to create offensive run game plans. So I had no worries about the -4.5. I thought it was going to be a steal. The other thing too, I want to say on the Stefon Diggs thing before we get out of here for the day was I was told, I know I spent a lot of time on this, but if I'm going to be a Bills fan and also because, I like Houston. I'm from Texas. I love to see the teams that were previously bad become good. So like when the Texans first became a franchise and they were absolute cheeks, I was hoping they'd finally find a way to turn it around. Then it seemed like they did. They went backwards and now they're kind of relevant again. And because they do have Stefon Diggs, who I do cape up for. I understand my biases. I've already laid them out there. At least I'm honest about it. I love the dude. I think that he gets a bad rap. But I'm glad that he's in Houston because he does have a competent quarterback, a lot of other weapons, good offensive line. He has the embrace there, it feels like, that he didn't have at the end of his at the beginning of each stint of where he's been celebrated because the production's been high. And sometimes when there comes money, there comes different expectations and the way that people view you changes. And, they don't always and that's when we talk about on the sideline, the interactions between Diggs and Allen, the interactions that we would see on the sideline between Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns. These things are, if you're winning and you're the reason why they're winning, it's, he's a competitive athlete. And this is what I talked with Scott offside about this because he was saying, I don't like the look. And I'm like, this is the dumbest thing that we do in sports, is saying that they're a diva or they're passionate just depending on what position they play, how they look, and how the interaction looks. But we're not there to actually hear the audio. That's a big part of it. But you can be a fiery competitor if you're winning and because of you that you're winning. But once the record starts to slip or your production looks off, then they can't be one and the same. Like we've seen Peyton Manning yell at people, and he's one of the most even keeled people that we know on the planet as far as football is concerned. But when I've been told that the Bills are going to miss Stefon Diggs, I do believe that they're going to miss him. This wide receiving core is still really young. And again, they haven't been asked to be top dogs yet. That offensive line is not good. They need to be able to use James Cook and Ray Johnson. They have to be able to use both backs. They're going to have to try to find a ways to win ugly, which is the problem that I've seen with Buffalo over the past number of years is the inability to win ugly games. You can win shootouts, but can you win ugly? And when you've had Stefon, he's always been able to bail you out or, again, open things up for other dudes. Nobody fears Keon Coleman right now. Nobody fears Khalil Shakir right now. Nobody fears Matt Collins. The fact that you don't know what you're getting, that always boils down to that too. You have no idea what you're getting week one out of offenses because either A, you're over-preparing for something that never actually happens, or you under-prepare for something out of the blue that actually did. And looking at Buffalo in that Arizona game I'm still worried. That game should not have been close. You had Kyler Murray, James Conner, and Marvin Harrison Jr. taking his first snap. You should have been able to beat the brakes off of that team. And you looked like crap early. They were down double digits. If Arizona doesn't play to lose, they beat Buffalo week one. I fully believe it. Don't get overhyped on the fact that they scored over 30 and Josh Allen looked like Superman because he flew into the end zone, even though he landed on his arm, or his elbow landed on his hand. It looks like there might be some injury. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to play against Miami anyways. But just because you win week one and you won in that was an ugly football game, man. It was entertaining. Doesn't mean it was good though. And I don't have high hopes for Buffalo right now. I really don't. I hope I'm wrong. Kind of, because I like to be right. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to go and hang it up for the day. Just a quick little episode today. I was supposed to have my Jacksonville Jaguars correspondent be on today with me, but there was some last minute stuff they had to take care of. So no Jaguars talk today. We're going to try to push it back to next week. But you guys know the drill. Like, share, subscribe, smash the 5-star reviews. We'll get the audio versions up later today for the last 3 episodes because your boys been falling behind. You guys know the drill. Stay up, stay blessed. We'll catch you guys on the next one.